It's a pleasure for me to introduce our sister, Dr. Abida Quansar. She had her degrees from Shahi Hamdan Institute of Islamic Studies, University of Kashmir in 2007, and her doctoral degree from the Department of Islamic Studies from Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi in 2013. And then she has 1-year diploma also in modern Arabic language. So many different qualifications. And then she has presented her research paper on bringing faith and means to life in a multicultural world, the perspective of the Quran and the Risale-i-Nur. So she is very well versed with the ideas of Ustaz Badiuzzama Said Nursi and Nursi studies, and also Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi, you know. So she herself organized a number of national, international webinars during her services as assistant professor in Islamic studies. She is member of Board of Studies, Department of Islamic Studies in University of Kashmir, Srinagar, and Cluster University, Srinagar also, and Al-Ulum Journal of Islamic Studies, Board of Reviews also. And today, inshallah, we will be listening to her seminar that is related to, you know, the I think the woman and according to Ustaz Nursi in the Risale-i-Nur as it is reflected, you know, in his ideas. So it is a pleasure for me to introduce to her. I think she can announce the topic much better than me. So I would like to give the floor to her.
Thank you very much for this generous introduction. Before starting any talk on today's topic, I would like to give a brief introduction for those who have joined this webinar for the first time. Badiuzzama Said Nursi was born in 1877 in the village of Nurs in the province of Biltis in eastern Turkey. His lifetime spanned the final decades of the Caliphate of Ottoman Empire, its collapse and dismemberment after the First World War in 1940 to 1918, and after the setting up of the Republic. It was the time when Islamic history in Turkey had taken a U-turn, and many profane reforms were enforced by the new government, such as the closure of the Sufi Zawiyas and the religious schools, the acceptance of secularism, the establishment of nationalist principles in a state of Islam, the wearing of the brimmed hat, the banning of Islamic dress for women, the enforced use of the Latin alphabet in place of the Quranic alphabet, the Izan and Iqamah being recited in Turkish, the prohibition of religious instruction in schools, the recognition of equal rights for women in inheritance, and the abolition of polygamy. In such a pathetic situation, Badiuzzama stood alone with firm belief to face all the attacks that time which were led in the name of science and progress. He utilized all his physical, mental, and spiritual capacities to reconstruct the edifice of Islam from its foundations, that is, belief, through his teachings in the form of his magnum opus, Risale-i-Nur. Beyond the geographical boundaries of the Muslim world, he was the embodiment of courage and firmness. He remained firm in spreading the truth in spite of all the barbarity inflicted on him by the government, like banishment and confinement. He wrote his work Risale-i-Nur from the jail itself and did not lose hope, but instead became the source of hope for others and become immortal through his work. When he was asked the question, why in opposition of Sunnah he had remained single, his beautiful answer describes volumes about his oceanic passion to fight against the false practitioners and against about Islam. He answered in these words, For 40 years now, it has been a time when, in the face of the awesome attacks of atheism, there has been great need for truly devoted people who are ready to sacrifice everything. So I took the decision to sacrifice for the truth of the all-wise Quran, not only my worldly happiness, but if necessary, my happiness in the hereafter as well. It was not a question of taking temporary worldly wiles, which is to follow the Sunnah. If I had been given 10 hurs here in this world, I would have been obliged to refuse them so that I might serve the truth of the Quran with sincerity. Badiuzzama has answered all those issues of women at the time of his acute illness. And he also wrote a separate treatise called A Guide for Women, from which I just quoted his saying when he was asked why he did it. This shows his extreme passion and enthusiasm for making women realize the elevated status conferred upon them by Islam. Sayyid Nursi has highly appreciated the sincere and enthusiastic interest of women in different parts of Turkey in writing and disseminating the teachings of Sayyid Nur. And he has asserted that women are in even greater need of guide at this time. A guide for women is the source of inspiration for all women without the consideration of their religion, region, or culture. It is a source of elevation of their morals, strengthening of their belief, stimulation of their innate natural capacities, and elucidation of the misconceptions associated with the status of women in Islam. They are diverging from the perverted concept of liberty to the pure and impeccable emancipation, along with the strength of unshakable belief in the hereafter, which builds a shield between them and the carnal desires which lead us to wrong path, and thus prepares them to build a God-fearing society. Sayyid Nursi has most correctly described the pathetic situation of the Western women in these words, I quote, "Family life now, which, under the guise of culture and civilization, is temporary animal relationship, followed by eternal separation, is being destroyed at its very foundations. The aim of materialistic Western civilization is not to fulfill the needs of human nature, but rather to exploit the nature in whatever ways it can in order to perpetuate itself despite its rotten foundations. The position of women in the West is truly grievous. In fact, if we talk of the contemporary times, it's not only in the West, but also in the Muslim world. This prediction of Sayyid Nursi befits. Their true nature and role in the family and home are being systematically destroyed. They are the main sacrificial victims to the voracious idol of the consumer society. The system demands that their bodies are exploited for advertising purpose, and besides exciting the greed and lust of others, they themselves are under constant pressure to spend and acquire ever more in the way of possession and luxuries for the home. Of course, all this means that they have to abandon their homes and families and go out to work." Unquote. Badiuzzama has suggested a unique method for the happy and successful family life, derived from the Quran and Hadith in his own unique way. The most important point in family life is that if the woman sees bad conduct and disloyalty in her husband, and to spite her husband, stints in her loyalty and faithfulness to him, then the factory of that family life will be thrown into confusion. For a woman who gives up complete loyalty pays a penalty in this world too. the woman should rather try to reform her husband's faults as far as she can in order to save her companion of eternity. Now, coming to the apt topic of today, which is, do women receive an unequal share in inheritance? Let us find the response from the Quran and Sayyid Nursi's commentary on the Quran. As we all know, that before the advent of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, women were totally deprived of inheritance, not only inheritance rights, but also the social, economic, and educational rights. But on the contrary, they were themselves inherited as a share of inheritance. For instance, a son inherited his stepmother and enjoyed absolute rights over her. He could give her in marriage to whoever he wished and could keep her under his own custody if he wills. It was not until the advent of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that women were given their due legal rights over property. If we talk of the Europe, it was not until the 19th century that women had the right to own their property. When they were married, either it would be transferred to the husband or she would not be able to dispense of it without of his permission. In Britain, perhaps the first country to give women some property rights, laws were passed in the 1860s, known as Married Women Property Act. And as we all know, that above 1400 years ago, that right was clearly established in Islamic law. Islam fully acknowledges women's right of an independent ownership in her money, real estate, or on any other properties. This right does not undergo any change whether she is single or married. The Quran guides us in clear words in this regard as follows. I will go through the translation. This is chapter 4, Surah An-Nisa, verse number 7, wherein Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned, I quote, men shall have a share in what parents and relatives leave behind, and women shall have a share in what parents and relatives leave behind, whether it be little or much. This is ordained, unquote. Another verse of the same surah, Surah An-Nisa, and luckily, this chapter is named after the women, An-Nisa. And there is no chapter known as Surah Rijal. And in this way also we can understand that how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his prophet has struggled to give back our rights and to prove that women are also human beings like men. So here I quote verse number 11 of Surah An-Nisa. Allah directs you as regards your children, to the male a portion equal to that of 2 females. If only daughters, 2 or more, their share is 2/3 of the inheritance. If only 1, her share is a half. For parents, 6 share of inheritance to each. If the deceased left children, if no children, and the parents are the only heirs, the mother has a third. If the deceased left brothers or sisters, the mother has a sixth. The distribution in all cases is after the payment of legacies and debts. You know not whether your parents or your children are nearest to you in benefit. These are settled portions ordained by Allah, and Allah is all-knowing, all-wise. I'm going to explain this verse later on. Now, the most common claim of those who misunderstand or misinterpret the status of women in Islam is regarding the discrimination of women in inheritance matter. In defense of the argument is used the selected portion of the above illustrated verse of the Quran. Which selected portion do they mention? To male, a portion equal to that of two females. However, if the portion is seen in conformity of the rest of the verse or other verses of the Quran related to inheritance rights of both the sexes, it would easily become manifested that the females sometimes inherit more depending on the variable number of heirs or heiresses of the deceased person. Sayyid Nursi explains the wisdom of the verse in his own unique way. He says, as for women, they take a husband and load their livelihood on him. And this makes up for the deficiency in what they have inherited. It is also mercy for a weak girl is greatly in need of kindness from her father and brothers. The Quran decrees that she received kindness from her father without worry. Her father does not consider her anxiously, thinking of her as a harmful child, due to whom half of his wealth will pass to the hands of a stranger, the husband of the daughter. Anxiety and anger are not mixed with his kindness. She also receives her brother's kindness and protection, free of rivalry and jealousy. He does not consider her as a rival who will destroy half the family and give an important part of the property to someone else. There will be no resentment and hostility mixed with his feelings of compassion and protection towards her. Thus, the girl, who is delicate and weak by nature, is apparently deprived of a small pot, but in place of it, she gains inexhaustible wealth in the form of the compassion and kindness of those close to her. Also, to give her more than her due, with the idea of being more merciful to her than divine mercy, is not kindness, but a great wrong. Indeed, the savage greed of the present time, which recalls the appalling tyranny of burying girl children alive in the age of ignorance due to savage jealousy, may possibly open the way to merciless wickedness like this one. All Quranic rulings confirm the decree, and we did not send you but as a mercy to all the worlds. Sayyid Nursi first comments on this selected portion of verse, and to the mother sixth. Just to attract the attention of the listeners, he says, this low civilization has caused an injustice by giving daughters more than their due, and it perpetrates an even greater injustice by not giving the mother what is her right. Yes, the compassion of mother is a most sweet, subtle, and lovely manifestation of dominical mercy. And among truths of the universe is one most worthy of respect and reverence. A mother is so generous, so compassionate, so self-sacrificing, a friend that driven by her compassion, she will sacrifice all her world, her life, and her comfort for her child. A timid hen, even the a timid hen will sacrifice all her world. He says that a timid hen, even the simple, blessed and lowest level of motherhood, will cast herself at a dog and attack a lion in order to protect her young, through a tiny manifestation of that compassion. And so, to deprive a mother who is the bearer of such an honorable and elevated truth of the property of her child is an appalling injustice, a most savage lack of respect. a compounded wrongful insult, and ingratitude for bounties that causes the divine throne of mercy to tremble and adds poison to a most brilliant and beneficial cure for man's social life. At the end, Bhadiyuzama gives such a wonderful answer in one sentence which can silence the whole world. He says, if those human monsters who claim to love humanity cannot understand this, for sure true humans can. They know that the all-wise Qur'an command of and to the mother a sixth is pure truth and pure justice. This is the unique feature of Badiuzzzaman Sayyid Nursi. He has his own way of explaining the things, explaining the Quranic verses and its wisdom. And the most beautiful two traits which Badiuzzzaman Sayyid Nursi has repeatedly pressed upon in Risala, that is true belief, strong belief, sincerity, and compassion. And if we follow these three traits, we'll be having a strong belief. Then definitely the person who is having strong belief, the property of this world doesn't mean anything to him or her. Secondly, he presses upon the sincerity. And the very first hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari is innamal a'malu binniyat. If our niyyah is sincere, if we have clear intentions, and if we do have true fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our heart, then definitely these questions will not be raised. But why a brother, why a husband, why a father will not give his portion to his daughter or his wife or his sister? It's all because of the lack of belief, because of the lack of sincerity, and because of the lack of compassion that such issues raise in our society. So here I also would like to explain the wisdom of this method of sharing as per the Quranic injunctions, that it's not always the woman is at loss. She does not always get little portion from the inheritance, but sometimes she gets equal portion to a male, and sometimes she gets even more. Now I will explain in the pointers. Number one, higher shares for males. The son takes twice as much as his sister if the deceased is their father. Secondly, equal shares for males and females. The female takes an equal share to that of the male, equal to that of 1/6 if the deceased is their son who has children of his own. That is, father also gets 1/6 portion of the inheritance from his son's property, and mother also gets 1/6 portion. Thirdly, equal shares are given to males and females if the deceased is their brother or sister and has left no direct heirs. The share is equal to 1/6 if the deceased left one brother and one sister, and 1/3 of more than two. Fourthly, higher shares for the females than males. The female, who is the daughter with no siblings of the deceased, takes half, and his father takes 1/6. No doubt, most of the times males are specified higher shares than females, but those whose needs and responsibilities are greater deserves higher share out of justice rather than injustice and prejudice. A hadith is narrated by Ibn Abbas that in the pre-Islamic period, the children used to inherit all the property, but the parents used to inherit only through a will. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cancelled that which he liked to cancel, and decreed that the share of a son was to be twice the share of a daughter. And for the parents, 1/6 for each one of them, or 1/3, and for the wife, 1/8 or 1/4, and for the husband, 1/2 or 1/4. Now, any attempt to alter the heirs of their fixed shares is tantamount to challenging the wisdom and directive of Allah. A share for men and a share for women. During the days of ignorance, only those who could fight and defend the family were entitled to inherit. Women and children were thus naturally excluded from the estate because they had no courage to fight. And Islam entrenched the right of women to the extent that a woman is guaranteed to inherit in her capacity as a mother, as a wife, as a daughter, and as a sister. The Quran has fixed the shares of each individual, which cannot be altered or changed. And the share of each heir is binding in the same way as the number of rak'ah is binding in salah. And when it comes to the financial security, Islamic law is more titled to many respects towards women. These are 6 examples I'm going to quote, and this has already been explained by Sayyid Nursi when I was reading his quote. Now, I would like to explain in pointers so that it will be easy for the listeners to understand. At the time of marriage, it is the duty of the husband, not the bride's family. He is supposed to pay for a marital gift. The Quran called it a gift, and it is exclusively the right of women. She doesn't have to spend it on the household. She doesn't have to give it to her father or anyone else. I remember when Hazrat Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he was on the pulpit and he had announced that the dower, meher, of a woman should be fixed like this and this. And there in the gathering, an old woman raised up, and she in fact fought against the caliph. And she said to him that, who are you to fix our meher? Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself has said in the Quran that if it will be equivalent to a mountain of gold. So Umar, you are no one to fix this. But one thing also that the Prophet ﷺ has, we have many examples from the prophetic time when women used to take just 2 pairs of shoes in use of meher. We have also example of a lady when her husband had nothing to present in meher, then the Prophet ﷺ asked him that, do you remember any portion of the Quran? When he nodded in yes, and the Prophet ﷺ said to the lady, are you ready to marry this man, and he is going to teach you that portion of the Quran which you don't know in use of the meher? And she accepted. Now here, we can also see the greed of women for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were not, in fact, they were not greedy for the things of this world. They were not so materialistic. They also had a strong belief. So were the men, so were the women. They just wanted the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is what Sayyid Nursi has repeatedly tried to explain in Risale Nur, that our aim and motto of our life should be only the pleasure of Allah. It should be the strong belief, sincerity, and all, which can turn our hell into heaven. Secondly, if the woman happened to own any property prior to marriage, she retains that property after marriage. It remains under her control. And also, in most Muslim countries, the woman keeps her own last name and her own identity, which is not, the case of the Western women. They have to change their last names as many, marriages they are going through. Thirdly, if a Muslim woman has any earnings during her marital life, by way of investments of her property or a result of work, she is not bound to spend one penny of that income on the household. It is entirely hers. But of course, yeah, thank you, Professor Turner. But as far as my research is concerned, I know, mashallah, you are like my teacher. But as far as my research is concerned, I have seen that I can explain in the end. Yeah. Of course, she's not bound, as per the Islam, she's not bound to spend any penny on any household. But women is compassionate, as Sayyid Nursi has also said in Risala Nur and a Guide to Women, that she's more compassionate than men. And you know, it is amazing that a man himself is accepting these things, that men are not so compassionate and men are not so self-sacrificing like women. Even women may not be able to admit such factors in public, but Sayyid Nursi has done so. And fourthly, the full maintenance and support of a married woman is the entire responsibility of her husband, even though she might be richer than him. But we have an example of Hazrat Khadija also, who spent every penny on his husband, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and for the cause of Islam. And she is our model, and Muslim women do so because we take Hazrat Khadija and we take all Ummahat al-Mu'minin as the models in our life. And fifthly, at the time of divorce, there are certain guarantees during the waiting period and even beyond for a woman's support. Sixthly, if the widow or divorcee has children, she is entitled to child support. In return for these listed securities, it is clear why the Islamic laws pertaining to inheritance give men a higher share. In addition to her proportionate share in inheritance, at different stages of her life, a woman is free to carry any honorable profession. She can be a doctor, a teacher, a trader, an engineer, an architect, a market supervisor, a policewoman, a judge, a jurist, anything which suits her physical strength as long as she remains within the boundaries of Sharia. And that boundaries are equally, bound on the Muslim men. And we cannot call these as boundaries, but actually the circle of Sharia frees us. It frees us. It elevates us in many ways. In fact, in all ways. And means, in a sense, that observance of Sharia frees men and women from all the difficulties of both the worlds and accords the actual honor to mankind which Allah has conferred them. Allah says in the Quran that we have honored the children of Adam and have borne them on the land and the sea, given them for sustenance things which are good and pure, and exalted them above many our creatures. So I would like to skip to the conclusion. Maybe I have taken a lot of time. When we look at our present situation, in the light of the illustrious thoughts of Badi'u Zaman, we will find that his predictions are quite fit in the present situation of women all over the world, beyond the geographical boundaries or beyond the boundaries of religion or region. So the need of the hour is to return to the Quran and Hadith and the explanations of such self-sacrificing and illuminated and inspired scholars, and to show by practice how Islam has elevated the status of women from abysmal situation to lofty position. It is the high time to prove how blasphemous are the contemporary propagandas against Islam without wasting any more of our precious and confined time, as we indeed have wasted a lot already. Allah says, then when guidance comes to you from me, anyone who follows my guidance will have no fear, nor will they grieve. That's all from my side. Now the floor is open if anybody wants to ask any question.